Well, if you're new here to Trinity, before the sermon, we have what's called a Worldview segment. Every weekend, right before the message, we have this moment where we believe that we are a spiritual intersection where moral, cultural, social, political issues collide with biblical truth. We base what we do here based on 1 Chronicles 12:32. It says in the Old Testament, the sons of Issachar, they understood the times in which they live and they knew what they should do. So as Christians, as followers of Christ, we need to understand the times in which we live so that we might know what we ought to do. And as times grow tougher, sermons can't keep getting weaker. So I'm going to talk about justice. Matter of fact, the sermon today, it's a heavy dose about God's justice. But there's a verse of Scripture, Micah chapter 6, verse 8. Most of us are familiar with it. It says, "He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." So what is justice? What does it mean to do justly or to act justly? The amazing thing is when it comes to justice, it's not something that you should just feel or think about, but it is something that you should do. So as Christians, we need to look for and see injustice, and then we need to do something about it. What we do might differ. The means may be different than the end. We all have the same end, to want to correct injustice, but the means to do it might be differently. But standing and doing nothing is not an option for those who are followers of God, because this is what God requires of us. We are to act justly. For example, we're to act justly on behalf of those who have been sex trafficked. My wife, many years ago, started a campaign, R2R, Running to Rescue. And over many years, this church and then eventually the community got involved. We raised over $500,000, and a home was built that to this day now exists, and women who have been rescued from sex trafficking are in the home and graduating from that home. When it comes to pro-life matters, as the mayor mentioned in the proclamation, this church couldn't just stand by idly and do nothing. We had to do something. So 30 years ago, we opened our Women's Pregnancy Center. 45 years ago, we did something about Christ-centered education, and we started a Christian school. When you look at the breakdown of the family, we need to do something. Injustice, child neglect, the abuse of children, we must do something. Foster care, adoption, support somehow, some way. When it comes to lenient drunk driving laws, we must do something. The state I came from, New Mexico, some 25 years ago, after a Christmas Eve service, a family jumped in their car. They were headed west on I-40. A drunk driver was headed east on I-40. There was a massive collision. Everyone in that car died except the husband. They were members of our church. The drunk driver survived. The mother of the deceased loved ones, she went on a campaign, a righteous indignation, to change the lenient drunk driving laws in New Mexico. And her voice was heard. She did something. She acted justly. She changed the laws, and perhaps many lives have been saved as a result of that. Gambling addiction, legalization of drugs, lowering of the age of consent, which some pedophile organizations are advocating to this day. We cannot just stand by idly and do nothing. We must do something. So the question is, what is justice? Well, justice is the most important moral concept in Western civilization. You know, when we place our hand over our heart and we say, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." Say that last part out loud with me. And justice for all. We are a nation that thrives and values on justice for all. So let's give a definition of justice. Justice is the ethical, philosophical idea that people are to be treated impartially, fairly, properly, and reasonably by the law and by the arbiters of the law, that laws are to ensure that no harm befalls another, and that where harm is alleged, a remedial action is taken. So, what is an understandable, everyday, ordinary, common sense, workable definition of justice? A couple of years ago, I read a book called The Calling of the American Mind, and I want to quote the authors of this book. Justice has two main parts, distributive and procedural. Distributive justice is the perception that people are getting what is deserved. Procedural justice is the perception that the process by which things are distributed and rules are enforced, that they are fair and trustworthy. Together, these make up what the authors call intuitive justice. This definition allows the common person to know where claims about social justice apply and where they don't apply. Let me give you an example. Let's say on Valentine's here at Trinity Christian School, a very kind, compassionate parent walked into our first graders class and had candy and cards, Valentine cards. And this parent, let's say this parent handed out candy or handed out cards to every first grader in that classroom. Every first grader got a card, a Valentine's card, but only half of the kids got candy. Now, what would the other half of the kids who got a card but no candy, what would they do? They'd look at what they got, they'd look at what the other kids got, they'd look at one another, they'd look at the teacher, and they don't have to have a degree in law or have attended an ethics class. They would have known something's not right here. And probably one brave soul, one brave first grader would say, "Excuse me, teacher, how come we didn't get candy like the other half got candy?" Because even they would know intuitively something was not fair, something was not just in what just occurred. So remember, common sense, intuitive justice. Apply it to some of the craziness going on in our country right now. A biological boy should not play sports with biological girls, and a biologically born boy should not be in the same locker room with biological girls. It's common sense. It's fairness. And when the rights of one person negates the rights of all the others, that is not just.